I was sitting in the low-back guest chair that Bradley Vance had refused to replace for the last 4 years, watching him slide a navy blue folder across the mahogany desk. I already knew what was inside. It was the 12th time. 12 times in 6 years, I had been passed over for the role of Director of Healthcare Solutions. The folder contained a polite, template-driven letter, thanking me for my dedication to Vertex Advisory, followed by a brief paragraph explaining that the board had decided to go in a different direction. That different direction was currently standing in the hallway, showing off her brand new business cards to the administrative staff. Her name was Clara Foster. She was 29 years old, had graduated from the Wharton School of Business 8 months prior, and had been with our firm for exactly 240 days. She had never managed a single live healthcare integration in her life. Bradley leaned forward, his face settling into that practiced expression of corporate empathy that always felt like a cheap customer service script. He sighed, adjusting his expensive titanium-rimmed glasses. "Roger, you have to understand that the current market landscape requires a certain type of academic pedigree to reassure our institutional clients," he said, his voice smooth and empty. The board felt that Clara's background aligns perfectly with where Vertex is heading in the next decade. "But I want to personally assure you that your contributions are invaluable. I have already put your name at the very top of the list for the next promotion cycle in the spring." I looked at him. I did not yell. I did not slam my fists on his desk. Instead, I did something that clearly made him uncomfortable. I smiled. It was a genuine, relaxed smile that reached my eyes. I had spent 6 years working 60 hours a week for this firm. I was 48 years old, and I had built the entire healthcare compliance division from a 2-person team into an operation that generated $8 million of Vertex's $18 million in annual revenue. I was the person they called at midnight when a hospital network server crashed. I was the one who personally salvaged our relationship with Apex Health, our largest client, when the previous director walked out in the middle of a major software migration. I had created the custom database queries, trained the junior analysts, and written the implementation manuals. Yet, sitting in that office, looking at Bradley's blank, corporate stare, I realized the truth. The system was not broken. It was working exactly as intended. It was designed to keep the workhorses pulling the cart while the show horses collected the medals. "Thank you for the update, Bradley," I said, standing up and closing the folder. "I appreciate the feedback." He blinked, visibly thrown by my lack of resistance. Usually, these meetings ended with me asking what specific metrics I needed to hit next, or what certifications I needed to acquire. Over the years, I had earned certifications in healthcare information security, advanced database administration, and project management. I had checked every single box they had ever set for me, only to watch them move the goalposts the moment my foot crossed the line. When they wanted more client experience, I spent a year traveling to hospital sites. When they wanted leadership, I mentored 6 junior consultants. This time, I did not ask what was missing. I simply walked out of his office, past Clara as she laughed with the marketing team, and went back to my desk. That night, I sat in my kitchen, staring at a lukewarm cup of black coffee. My brother Owen, who was 44 and worked as a senior financial analyst for a shipping company, sat across from me. He had been listening to me explain the situation for the last hour, analyzing the corporate dynamics with the cold precision of an economist. When I finally stopped talking, he set his mug down and looked at me with a dry, unsentimental expression. "You are suffering from the sunk cost fallacy, Roger," Owen said, his voice flat. "You keep throwing your time and energy into Vertex because you have already invested 6 years of your life there. You think that if you leave now, all that effort is wasted. But the reality is that the value of your past investment is zero. The only thing that matters is the future return on your time. And right now, your return at Vertex is negative. You are trading 60 hours a week of your life for a salary that has not changed in 3 years, while they use your expertise to justify their own bonuses." "I cannot just quit, Owen," I replied, rubbing my temples. "I have a mortgage, and the consulting market is tight right now." "I did not say you should walk out tomorrow without a plan," Owen countered, leaning forward. "I said you need to stop giving them your best. You need to stop trying to earn the approval of people who have already decided they will never promote you. You need to audit your own value and determine what you actually own. If you are the one holding their biggest accounts together, you have more leverage than you think. You need to stop behaving like an employee and start behaving like a business partner. His words stayed with me long after he left. I lay awake in the dark, thinking about the operational architecture of Vertex Advisory. I knew where every critical dependency lay. I knew which databases were held together by temporary code I had written. More importantly, I knew that despite Bradley's belief that a Wharton degree could run the division, the clients did not trust the brand. They trusted me. I did not need to win their game. I just needed to rewrite the rules. I decided to give myself 6 months. 6 months to execute a quiet, calculated exit. I would not sabotage the company. I would not delete files or break databases. I would simply document my value, establish my boundaries, and let the weight of their own incompetence collapse the structure around them. On Monday morning, I began the first phase of my plan. I did not arrive early, and I did not stay late. For the first time in 6 years, I left my laptop on my desk at exactly 5 o'clock in the afternoon and walked out of the building. When Bradley sent me an email at 9 o'clock that evening, asking for an emergency review of a client proposal, I did not open it. I let it sit. The next morning, I responded at 9 o'clock sharp, stating that I would review the document during my scheduled working hours. Bradley did not mention it, but I saw the slight tightening of his jaw when I passed him in the hallway. My main focus, however, was not on Bradley. It was on the legal foundation of my relationship with Vertex. When I had joined the firm 6 years ago as employee number 23, the company was small and desperate for technical expertise. The retired founding partner, Julian Cross, had hired me specifically to build a compliance auditing engine. Because Vertex could not afford my market salary at the time, Julian had agreed to sign a special intellectual property rider that I had drafted. I spent my lunch hour at a small park 3 blocks from the office, reviewing the digital copy of my original employment agreement on my personal phone. The document was clear and unambiguous. The compliance database system I had built, which we called Sentinel Audit, was not classified as a standard work made for hire. Under the terms of the rider, the copyright to the core algorithm and database structure remained my personal intellectual property under Section 106 of Title 17 of the United States Code. Vertex was granted a non-exclusive, revocable license to use Sentinel Audit, with the explicit condition that the license would terminate automatically if my employment ended or if Vertex failed to promote me to the level of director within 3 years of my start date. They had missed the 3-year promotion deadline 3 years ago. Technically, Vertex had been operating Sentinel Audit on an expired license for 36 months. Because they had never audited their legacy agreements, they had absolutely no idea that their entire healthcare consulting framework was built on software they did not legally own. They had simply assumed that because I was an employee, everything I built belonged to the corporation. That evening, I met with Evelyn Montgomery, an intellectual property attorney, whose office was located in a quiet brick building in the suburbs. She was 53 years old, with sharp blue eyes and a reputation for dismantling corporate contracts. She spent 45 minutes reading through my contract and the intellectual property rider, her expression shifting from curiosity to a quiet, satisfied smile as she reviewed the signatures. "This is remarkably clean, Roger," Evelyn said, sliding the papers back across her desk. Julian Cross was a decent businessman, but he was a terrible legal planner. By signing this rider to secure your services, he effectively gave you a kill switch for their healthcare division. Under federal copyright law, specifically Section 106, you hold the exclusive rights to reproduce, distribute, and display this software. The moment you terminate your employment, their license to run Sentinel Audit evaporates. They cannot legally use it to support their clients, and they cannot sell it to a third party. Can they claim they own it because I developed it while receiving a salary? I asked. "Not with this rider," Evelyn replied, tapping the signature page. "This document explicitly overrides the standard work made for hire doctrine. It states that ownership remains with you. unless a formal transfer agreement is signed upon your promotion to director. Since that promotion never happened, the copyright never transferred. If they continue to use the system after you leave, they will be committing willful copyright infringement. Under federal law, that carries statutory damages of up to $150,000 per violation, and we can file for an immediate injunction to shut down their servers. Additionally, because the agreement specifies a retroactive royalty of 5% of the software's commercial value, if the promotion was not granted, you are owed substantial back licensing fees. I sat back, feeling a wave of relief. The legal weapon was real, and it was absolute. I did some quick calculations. Based on the billing logs, Vertex owed me $385,000 in unpaid licensing fees. We need to time this perfectly, Evelyn continued, her voice cool and strategic. You will give your standard 2-week notice in 6 months. On the day your notice expires, my office will serve them with a formal cease and desist letter revoking their license to Sentinel Audit. If they attempt to run the system for their clients after that date, we will file the lawsuit in federal court. In the meantime, you must not mention this to anyone. You must continue to do your job professionally and collect every scrap of system documentation to prove you are the sole author of the codebase. I agreed. I went home that night and looked at my savings. I had accumulated enough money to cover my living expenses. For 8 months, I had already registered a new corporate entity, Veritas Consulting, on paper. I was not planning to run away. I was planning to build something better. During the 3rd month of my plan, the operational cracks at Vertex began to widen. Clara Foster had been put in charge of the Apex Health account, which represented 35% of our division's revenue. She had arrived with a series of colorful presentation slides outlining a new synergy protocol designed to reduce response times by 20%. What she did not understand was that Apex Health's database structure was a legacy system from the late 90s that could not handle modern automated queries without crashing. I watched from the sidelines as Clara ordered the engineering team to deploy a new automated reporting script. I knew the script would overload the database. I wrote a formal warning email to Clara, detailing the technical risks and explaining that the legacy system required manual indexing before running large queries. She replied with a brief message, thanking me for my input, but stating that her new protocol was designed to eliminate unnecessary manual interventions. She ignored my warning completely. I printed both emails and saved them in my personal files. I was no longer the director of emergency operations. I was simply a senior consultant. I did my work, closed my laptop at 5 o'clock and went home. At 10 o'clock that night, my personal phone rang. It was Ian Finch, the assistant to our chief executive officer, Howard Thorne. Ian was a young man of 26 who frequently complained about the toxic atmosphere in the executive suite. Roger, I am sorry to call you so late, Ian said, his voice frantic. The Apex Health system is down. They have been offline for 2 hours, and the hospital billing department cannot process transactions. The client is losing thousands of dollars every hour. Howard is in a screaming match with Bradley in the conference room. Bradley is trying to reach you, but your work phone is turned off. I am at home, Ian, I said calmly. My working hours ended at 5 o'clock. Bradley can log a support ticket with the system administrator. He tried, but the system administrator is a junior developer who does not know how to rebuild the index tables, Ian whispered. Bradley is saying you are sabotaging the project by not answering your phone. He is threatening to write you up for insubordination. I am not sabotaging anything, I replied. I wrote a detailed warning to Clara this afternoon explaining exactly how to prevent this crash. She chose to ignore it. I am simply off the clock. I will look at the issue tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. When I walked into the office the next morning, the atmosphere was suffocating. Bradley was standing outside my cubicle, his face red and his tie slightly askew. Where have you been, Roger? He demanded, his voice carrying across the open floor plan. Apex Health was down for 11 hours. We had to pay a $20,000 penalty for violating our service level agreement. The client's chief executive officer called Howard directly. You are the only one who knows how to restore the database index. I looked at him, my expression neutral. Bradley, my contract specifies a 40-hour work week. If you want 24-hour emergency coverage, we need to renegotiate my compensation and my title. As a senior consultant, I am not on call. You are a team player, Roger, he hissed. Or at least you used to be. This attitude is exactly why the board felt you were not ready for a leadership role. Leaders do not walk out when the company is in crisis. Leaders do not promote people with 8 months of experience to manage systems they do not understand, I replied, keeping my voice quiet and level. I will have the database restored by noon. I restored the system, but the damage was done. Not to the database, but to Vertex's relationship with the client. 2 days later, I received a private message from Evelyn Brooks, the Chief Information Officer of Apex Health. She asked if we could meet for coffee near her office. When we met, Evelyn looked tired. She was a no-nonsense woman of 56 who had worked in healthcare logistics for 3 decades and knew the value of stable operations. Roger, what is happening over at Vertex? She asked, leaning over the table. This new director, Clara, is a disaster. She does not understand our architecture, and she treats our IT staff like they are entry-level technicians. She tried to tell my database lead that manual indexing was obsolete. If you had not stepped in to fix the index tables, we would still be offline. We are experiencing some internal transitions, Evelyn, I said carefully. I do not care about their transitions, she said, her voice sharp. I care about our billing system. If Vertex cannot provide stable operations, we will have to look for another provider when our contract expires in 4 months. The only reason we have stayed this long is because of you. I do not trust Bradley Vance, and I certainly do not trust Clara Foster. I took a slow sip of my coffee, realizing this was the moment. Evelyn, off the record. I am planning to leave Vertex in 3 months, I said. I am starting my own firm, Veritas Consulting. She looked at me, her eyes narrowing slightly. And the software, the Sentinel audit engine we use? It is my personal intellectual property, I replied. I wrote it before I joined Vertex, and I retain the copyright. When I leave, Vertex will no longer have the legal right to run the system. Evelyn sat in silence for a long moment, analyzing the potential scenarios. If we stay with Vertex, we lose the software and the developer, she murmured. If we move our business to your new firm, we secure both. I can have your system migrated to a secure cloud database within 10 days, with 0 downtime, I said. And my monthly advisory fee will be 20% lower than what Vertex is currently charging you. She smiled, a small, decisive movement of her lips. Keep me updated on your timeline, Roger. We will not renew with Vertex. The final month of my plan arrived with a quiet intensity. I had spent the last 5 months ensuring that every document, every system layout, and every client contact sheet was perfectly organized. I wanted to make sure that my departure was completely clean, with no grounds for them to accuse me of professional negligence. I had also quietly secured a contract with Genesis Health, our second largest client, representing 20% of the division's revenue. Like Evelyn Brooks, their chief operating officer was tired of Bradley's empty promises and Clara's operational incompetence. They were ready to transition to Veritas Consulting the moment I was operational. On a rainy Thursday afternoon, exactly 6 months after my 12th promotion rejection, I walked into Bradley Vance's office. I did not wait for his assistant to announce me. I simply stepped inside, closed the door, and placed a single sheet of paper on his mahogany desk. It was my formal resignation letter, offering my standard 2-week notice. Bradley looked down at the paper, then up at me, his expression shifting from annoyance to genuine confusion. "What is this, Roger?" he asked. Leaning back in his leather chair, "I am resigning, Bradley," I said, keeping my voice calm and even. "My last day will be the 25th of this month." He blinked, then laughed, a short, nervous sound. "You cannot resign now. We are in the middle of the Genesis Health migration, and the Apex Health renewal is next month. We need you to coordinate the technical transition. You cannot leave the team hanging like this." "I have spent the last 5 months organizing the documentation," I replied. "The team has access to all the system layouts and administration guides. I am sure Clara can manage the transition." "Roger, let us not be hasty," he said, his tone shifting into that familiar, patronizing warmth. "Is this about the promotion? 'Cause I told you, spring is just around the corner. I have been talking to Howard, and we are willing to accelerate the timeline. We can offer you the director title effective next week, along with a 15% increase in your base salary. We will also give you your own office on the fourth floor." I looked at him, feeling a profound sense of detachment. 6 years of working late, 6 years of checking boxes, and the title was suddenly available the moment I walked toward the door. "No, thank you, Bradley," I said. "My decision is final." He stood up, his face darkening. "You are being unreasonable. We have given you a home for 6 years. We built this business together. You cannot just walk out on us when things get difficult. You owe us some loyalty." "I walked out because you chose to value pedigree over performance," I said. "I gave you 6 years to make this right. You had 12 opportunities. You chose to pass every single time. Loyalty is a two-way street, Bradley." By the end of my first week of notice, the executive suite was in a state of absolute panic. The junior developers had tried to run a routine update on the compliance system, only to discover they did not understand how to patch the database without crashing the Sentinel audit engine. Bradley called me into a meeting with Howard Thorne, our chief executive officer. Howard was 56 years old, a tall man who had spent his career in finance and viewed the healthcare division as a collection of spreadsheets. He looked exhausted, his collar unbuttoned and his desk covered in printouts of system error logs. "Roger, we need to resolve this," Howard said, his voice gravelly. "Bradley tells me you are refusing to sign the technical transition documents. We are prepared to offer you a managing director position. Skip the standard director level, with a 30% increase in your salary and a seat on the management committee. We will also grant you $50,000 in equity options." "I appreciate the offer, Howard," I said, sitting with my hands folded in my lap, "but I am not interested in negotiating. My last day remains the 25th. "What do you want, Roger?" Howard asked, his voice rising in frustration. "Name your price. We cannot have our systems failing during the Apex Health renewal." "I do not want your money, Howard," I replied. "I want to build my own business." On my final afternoon, I packed my few personal belongings into a small cardboard box. I had 3 desk plants, a coffee mug, and a notebook. I looked around the cubicle where I had spent thousands of hours, feeling no regret, only a deep sense of relief. As I walked toward the glass exit doors of the lobby, Bradley Vance stopped me. He looked smaller than he had 6 years ago, his expensive suit looking slightly wrinkled. "You are making a massive mistake, Roger," Bradley whispered, his voice laced with venom. "You are 48 years old. You think you can compete with a firm like Vertex on your own? You won't last 6 months in this market." I did not argue. I did not get angry. I simply smiled, pushed open the glass doors, and walked out into the cool rain. At exactly 5 o'clock that evening, my last day of employment officially ended. 10 minutes later, Evelyn Montgomery's associate delivered a formal legal packet to Howard Thorne and Bradley Vance at the Vertex headquarters. It was a cease and desist notice, informing them that their license to use the Sentinel audit engine had officially terminated with my departure. Under Section 106 of Title 17 of the United States Code, any continued use, reproduction, or distribution of the software would constitute willful copyright infringement, subject to statutory damages of $150,000 per violation. The countdown had begun. The reaction from Vertex Advisory was swift and desperate. On Monday morning, Howard Thorne called my personal phone 3 times. I did not answer. I knew that direct communication would only cloud the legal strategy, so I forwarded the voicemail straight to Evelyn Montgomery. By Tuesday afternoon, Vertex's outside counsel had sent an aggressive response to Evelyn, claiming that I was in breach of my non-compete agreement, accusing me of poaching corporate assets, and threatening to file a lawsuit to block Veritas Consulting from operating in the region. Evelyn called me into her office to review their letter. She was smiling as she poured me a cup of hot tea, completely unbothered by their hostile legal threats. "They are playing a very weak hand, Roger," she said, leaning back in her chair. "First, their claim about the non-compete is completely invalid. Under state law, specifically California Business and Professions Code Section 16,600, non-compete agreements in employment contracts are void and unenforceable except under very narrow circumstances, such as the sale of a business. But more importantly, I checked your HR file through the discovery requests we prepared. Bradley Vance was so focused on rushing your contract writer 6 years ago that he forgot to attach the standard non-compete schedule to your final employment agreement. They do not even have a signed document. They have absolutely no legal grounds to restrict your business, so they have no non-compete, and they do not own the software, I said. Exactly, Evelyn replied. I have already sent a response outlining these facts, along with the physical proof of their HR oversight. I also informed them that if they do not shut down the Sentinel audit servers by Friday noon, we will file for an immediate injunction in federal district court and notify their clients that Vertex is operating without a valid software license. That would destroy their remaining credibility in the healthcare sector, and their corporate directors could face personal liability for signing audit reports without a legal compliance license. By Thursday morning, the panic had reached a boiling point. Apex Health and Genesis Health both sent formal notices to Vertex Advisory, terminating their contracts for cause due to Vertex's failure to certify that they owned the intellectual property rights to the compliance software. Both clients signed contracts with Veritas Consulting that afternoon. On Friday morning at 10 o'clock, Howard Thorne called my personal phone again. This time, I answered. Roger, please, Howard said, his voice cracking with exhaustion. We need to settle this. The board is meeting this afternoon. We have lost Apex Health and Genesis Health. Our division revenue is down by 55%. If this lawsuit goes public, the merger we have been negotiating for the last year will collapse completely. We will be ruined. I am listening, Howard, I said, sitting at my new desk in the small office space I had rented. We will pay the back royalties, he said. We will pay you $385,000 in licensing fees and back royalties for the last 3 years of system usage. In exchange, we want a non-exclusive, perpetual license to run the legacy version of Sentinel Audit for our remaining small clients. And we want you to sign a mutual release of all claims. We will not challenge your work with Apex Health or Genesis Health. My attorney will review the settlement agreement, Howard, I replied, but the terms must include the payment of all my legal fees. We will pay them, he said, sounding completely defeated. Just have Evelyn send the draft. The wire transfer of $385,000 cleared into my business account 5 days later. Seeing that balance in my business account was the ultimate validation of my work. I used the capital to lease a professional office space and hire my first employee, Maya Kelly, a brilliant data analyst who had been overlooked at her previous firm because she lacked an Ivy League degree. 6 months after my departure from Vertex, my business was thriving. Veritas Consulting had secured 5 major healthcare clients, and our revenue had reached $1,200,000. One afternoon, my phone rang. The screen showed Howard Thorne's name. Hello, Howard, I said. Roger, I am calling to see if you would be open to a meeting, he said, his voice quiet and respectful. We are restructuring. Bradley Vance was let go by the board last month after the audit revealed his management failures cost us our key accounts. We are looking to rebuild the healthcare division. We would be open to discussing a merger between Veritas and Vertex, or we can offer you the position of executive vice president with an equity stake and double your previous salary. I looked out the window of my office, watching the sun set over the city. I thought about the 6 years I had spent begging for a seat at their table, the 12 rejections, and the constant feeling of not being quite good enough. Thank you for the offer, Howard, I said, and I was surprised to find that I felt no anger, only a quiet sense of closure. But I have built my own table now. I am not interested. Today, Veritas Consulting has 17 employees. Clara Foster, who realized within 3 months that Bradley Vance was using her credentials as a shield for his own incompetence, resigned from Vertex and now works as our Director of Client Services. She is, as it turns out, exceptionally talented when she is not trapped in a toxic corporate environment. The 12 rejections I received were not obstacles. They were the redirection I needed to discover my own worth. Sometimes, the only way to win a rigged game is to walk away and build your own table from scratch, where value is measured by competence rather than empty politics.